is the tail end of a hot August in California. 1984. The summer is winding down. College students are getting ready to head back to class. Neighborhoods are alive with the kind of ordinary Tuesday afternoon buzz that makes you feel like nothing bad could ever happen on a street like this. A young woman, 21 years old, full of life, full of ambition, trained in the martial arts, dreaming of becoming a law enforcement officer. She was supposed to have her whole life ahead of her. But sometime before 12:45 in the afternoon on August 20th, 1984, somebody walked into her world and took everything from her. And for over 40 years, no one has been brought to justice. No one has been held accountable. The killer has walked free. Until now, investigators are fighting back. This is the case of Kelly Ralston. Kelly Ann Ralston was born on May 12, 1963, in the United States. By the summer of 1984, she was 21 years old and living in San Jose, California, a city that sits at the southern end of the San Francisco Bay Area, a city known for its tech corridor, its universities, and its working-class neighborhoods where young people came to chase dreams and build something real. Kelly was one of those young people. She was enrolled as a student at San Jose State University, a respected public institution right in the heart of downtown San Jose, where thousands of students walk the campus every single semester hoping to build a future worth living. Kelly had a very specific dream. She did not just want to graduate. She wanted to serve. According to investigative reports that surfaced years after her death, Kelly Ralston aspired to become a police officer. She wanted to protect people. She wanted to be the one who showed up when things went wrong. And in one of the most heartbreaking ironies of this entire case, the very profession she dreamed of joining would one day be the team fighting to find her killer. Kelly was not just a student with a dream. She was a trained martial artist. She held a brown belt in karate. That is not a beginner's rank. A brown belt represents years of discipline, hours upon hours of training, mental focus, physical dedication, and a deep commitment to the practice. She was not someone who would go down without a fight. She was someone who knew how to defend herself. And the evidence at that crime scene, as we're going to walk through together, shows that she did exactly that. She fought back. She fought hard. And the fact that she lost that fight tells us something terrifying about what she faced on that August afternoon. Kelly lived in an apartment on the 4900 block of Edgar Court in San Jose, near Cherry Avenue and the Almaden Expressway. She shared that apartment with a roommate, the way so many young college students do, splitting the rent, figuring out life together, building a home away from home. She was 21 years old. She was training in karate. She was studying at San Jose State, and she was planning a future in law enforcement. She had every reason in the world to keep going. Somebody decided she would not get the chance. August 28, 1984. It was a Tuesday. The kind of afternoon where the California sun was still burning strong, school was about to kick back into gear, and life was supposed to be moving forward. But at approximately 12:45 in the afternoon, that is 1:45 in the afternoon, Kelly Ralston's roommate came home to their shared apartment on Edgar Court. What that roommate walked into would change everything. They found Kelly. She was inside the apartment in the downstairs bedroom, suffering from multiple traumatic injuries. The official case documentation states that she died of numerous wounds throughout her body. The scene told a story even before the detectives began their work. The apartment showed clear, obvious, undeniable signs of a violent struggle. Things were out of place. The evidence of a fight was written all over that room. And then investigators found something else, a small kitchen knife, recovered right there in the same room where Kelly was found. Authorities believe that knife was the murder weapon. Think about that. Kelly Ralston held a brown belt in karate. She knew how to fight. She knew how to defend herself. The fact that someone overpowered a trained martial artist tells us that this was not a quick, opportunistic attack. This was a brutal, sustained, vicious assault. She did not go quietly. She did not surrender. The struggle in that apartment was real, and it was intense. But at the end of it, Kelly was gone. She was just 21 years old. Officers with the San Jose Police Department were called to the scene at approximately 12:45 that afternoon. The case number assigned was 84-241-0511. Investigators from the San Jose Police Department worked that scene, collected evidence, interviewed witnesses, and launched what they described as extensive investigative efforts. But despite all of that work in the days, weeks, and months that followed, no arrest was ever made. No charges were ever filed. The case went cold. When the San Jose Police Department first responded to Edgar Court on that August afternoon in 1984, they were dealing with a violent and complex crime scene. The evidence of a fierce struggle was evident throughout the apartment. A potential murder weapon, that small kitchen knife, had been recovered. A young woman with martial arts training had clearly fought for her life. Investigators worked the case. They pursued leads. They spoke with people connected to Kelly's life and to the neighborhood. The case received attention from law enforcement, and in 1989, 5 years after the murder, this news organization reported that Kelly had apparently fought furiously against her knife-wielding attacker. That detail, released years after the fact, speaks volumes. The detectives who worked this case in those early years knew they were looking for someone dangerous, someone who had overpowered a trained fighter, someone who had been close enough to that apartment complex to access it, carry out a violent attack, and then disappear. But despite what investigators described as extensive investigative efforts at the time, the case went cold. No suspect was identified. No arrest was made. And here is the part that is going to stop you cold. There was a suspect description. Someone had given investigators information about a possible suspect. A description that gave details about who might have done this to Kelly Ralston. And that description was never made public. For decades, that piece of information sat buried in a case file while the person who may have taken Kelly's life walked free, lived their life, potentially moved on like nothing had ever happened. The original investigation eventually ran out of steam. There were no DNA databases with the kind of matching capabilities we have today. There were no digital tools, no advanced forensic technologies, no social media trails to follow. Investigators in 1984 were working with what they had, and what they had was not enough to close the case. The file was shelved. The case went officially cold. But Kelly Ralston's name never left the books. For decades, Kelly Ralston's case sat in a filing cabinet inside the San Jose Police Department's cold case files. Her name was on that list, case number 84-241-0511, among other unsolved homicides in one of California's largest cities. Think about what 40 years means in this context. It means that whoever killed Kelly Ralston has lived a full adult life since that August afternoon in 1984. If the suspect was between 32 and 35 years old at the time of the crime, and we are going to get to that suspect description in just a moment, that means today, in 2026, this individual would be somewhere between 72 and 75 years old. They have had children, grandchildren perhaps. They have watched the world change, watched technology transform, watched forensic science evolve into something almost unrecognizable compared to what it was in the summer of 1984. And through all of it, they have carried the knowledge of what they did. Kelly's family carried a different kind of weight. They carried grief that never fully resolves when there is no justice attached to it. There is a psychological reality to unsolved murder that is different from resolved cases. The family never gets to close that chapter. They never get to sit in a courtroom and watch someone be held accountable. They live with questions that have no answers. They grieve not just the loss of their person, but the loss of justice, the loss of closure. In 2005, 21 years after the murder, someone called in an anonymous tip related to the case. That tip suggested that the suspect likely lived in the vicinity of the crime at the time of the killing. Somebody out there knew something. Somebody had been carrying that information around. But the case still did not break. The tip was logged, filed, and ultimately did not lead to a resolution at the time. The silence continued until 2026. February 2026. More than 40 years after Kelly Ralston was murdered in her San Jose apartment, the San Jose Police Department made an announcement that turned heads across the Bay Area and beyond. Detectives from the SJPD Homicide Unit, working in collaboration with investigators from the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office Cold Case Unit, had re-examined the case file. And what they found inside those old documents was something that should have been public knowledge decades ago. They found a suspect description, a detailed account of a possible person of interest that had never been disclosed to the public. According to San Jose Police Sergeant Jorge Garibay, who spoke to reporters about the renewed investigation, the review uncovered this previously withheld suspect description buried within the original case materials. In addition to reopening the investigation, detectives announced they were now conducting a comprehensive review of all original evidence, prior investigative leads, and additional case materials. The goal was clear: to determine whether advancements in forensic technology or fresh information from the public could finally move this case forward after more than 4 decades of silence. The Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office Cold Case Unit has made a name for itself in recent years by combining old-school detective work with modern forensic tools, things like updated DNA databases, genetic genealogy techniques that can trace familial DNA, advanced fingerprint matching systems, and digital forensic capabilities that simply did not exist in 1984. The fact that this unit put its weight behind the Ralston case in early 2026 signals something important. Investigators believe there is still a path to justice. They believe that somewhere out there, the evidence exists to put a name and a face to the person who killed Kelly Ralston. And now, after 42 years of waiting, they are asking the public for help. Now, here is the detail that changes this case completely. The detail that investigators kept locked inside that file folder for over 40 years, and the detail that could be the key to finally giving Kelly Ralston's family the justice they have been waiting for since 1984. A witness, someone who had information at or around the time of the crime, gave investigators a description of a possible suspect. That description was never released to the public. Not in 1984. Not in the years that followed. Not when that anonymous tip came in 2005. For some reason that has not been fully explained publicly, that description sat in the file, unseen by anyone outside of law enforcement, for decades. Here is what we know about the possible suspect. Investigators described the individual as a white male adult. At the time of the crime, August 28, 1984, he was estimated to be between 32 and 35 years old. He stood approximately 5 feet 7 inches to 5 feet 8 inches tall. He had a thin build, and his hair was described as strawberry blonde. That is a fairly specific description. Strawberry blonde hair is a distinctive feature. It is not common, it is memorable, and it is the kind of detail that someone who saw this person would likely still remember decades later. The height range of 5'7" to 5'8" puts him squarely in an average male height range for that era in the United States. And the thin build combined with the hair color creates a picture that, if matched against the right memory, could crack this case wide open. Now here is the other critical piece of information that came out of the 2026 review. Investigators found that separate 2005 anonymous tip I mentioned earlier, and it specifically indicated that this possible suspect likely lived in the vicinity of the crime at the time of Kelly's death. That means investigators are not looking for someone who traveled from across the country to Edgar Court on a random Tuesday afternoon. They are likely looking for someone who lived nearby, someone who knew that neighborhood, someone who possibly knew Kelly, or at least knew the building, the routine, the layout. Someone who was part of the fabric of that community in the summer of 1984 and who has likely been hoping for 40 years that nobody would ever connect the dots. Let us stop for a moment and really think about what this information tells us, because when you connect the dots here, a picture starts to form that is both chilling and revealing. Kelly Ralston was a karate brown belt. She was trained in hand-to-hand self-defense. She was a physically active young woman who had spent years in a discipline designed specifically to give a person the ability to protect themselves. The crime scene showed undeniable signs of a violent struggle. She fought back, and yet she lost. Now consider the suspect description. A man between 32 and 35 years old in 1984. That is not a teenager acting impulsively. That is not a young adult in a moment of reckless rage. That is a grown man, a man in his 30s, presumably with some level of physical capability, and likely some familiarity with the area, possibly even the building. The anonymous tip from 2005 says he likely lived nearby. So we are potentially looking at a neighbor, someone Kelly may have seen before, someone who knew the rhythm of that apartment complex, someone who chose a time, a Tuesday afternoon, just before 1 o'clock, when the building would be relatively quiet. The fact that the suspect description was never released to the public is one of the most puzzling aspects of this entire case. In cases like this, investigators sometimes hold back information either because they were actively pursuing a specific lead and did not want to tip off a suspect, or because of procedural decisions that may have ultimately hindered the investigation. Whatever the reason, that description sat quiet for 40 years. In those 40 years, the suspect, if still alive, aged from somewhere in his 30s into his 70s. He may have moved. He may have changed his appearance. He may be living somewhere entirely different from a Bay Area today. But here is the thing about human beings: we talk. We confide. We whisper. Somebody in this person's life, whether a former friend, a family member, an ex-partner, someone who heard a story or noticed a change in behavior after August of 1984, somebody out there knows something. And investigators are counting on exactly that. One of the most powerful weapons in the hands of cold case investigators today is something that simply did not exist in 1984, the modern forensic toolkit. When Kelly Ralston was murdered, DNA analysis, as we know it today, was essentially non-existent in criminal investigations. The first use of DNA profiling in a criminal case in the United States did not happen until 1987, 3 years after Kelly's murder. Fingerprint databases were limited and manual. There was no internet. There was no way to cross-reference evidence against national genetic databases. Investigators were working in a world where a case either broke based on witness testimony, physical evidence that pointed directly to a suspect, or a confession. Fast forward to 2026. DNA technology has transformed law enforcement. Genetic genealogy, a technique that traces familial DNA through consumer ancestry databases, has cracked cases that were cold for 50 years. The FBI's next-generation identification system can match partial fingerprints against hundreds of millions of records. Digital forensics teams can trace electronic patterns, communication histories, and geographic data that paint detailed pictures of a person's movements and associations. The San Jose Police Department and the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Cold Case Unit are not coming back to this case empty-handed. They are coming back with a generation's worth of technological advancement on their side. If there is biological evidence from that crime scene in 1984 that has been properly preserved, and many departments have improved evidence storage dramatically over the decades, modern DNA analysis could potentially identify a suspect who was never on anyone's radar in 1984. The renewed investigation announced in February 2026 specifically stated that detectives were reviewing the original evidence to determine whether advancements in forensic technology could help move the case forward. That is not a vague platitude. That is investigators telling the public, we have new tools, we are going back to the evidence, and we believe there is a shot at justice here. Here is the reality of cold cases, and is something we talk about a lot on this channel. Killers do not exist in a vacuum. They have lives. They have relationships. They have histories. And very often, somewhere in that web of human connection, there is a person who knows something. Maybe something they were too afraid to say in 1984, maybe something they overheard and filed away without realizing its significance, maybe something that only makes sense now in the context of a renewed investigation decades later. The San Jose Police Department is making a direct appeal to the public. They are asking anyone who has information about this case, no matter how small, no matter how seemingly insignificant, to come forward. Think about who might have this information. Someone who lived on the 4900 block of Edgar Court in the summer of 1984. A neighbor who saw something unusual that afternoon. Someone who knew a man matching that suspect description. A white male, thin-billed, strawberry blonde hair, between 32 and 35 years old at the time, who lived in that neighborhood. A former friend, an ex-partner, a family member, someone who heard a story over the years that never quite sat right. Someone who saw a change in behavior in someone they knew after August 28, 1984. Someone who received a confession or half a confession or a slip of the tongue over a drink one night that has stuck with them ever since. Think about the anonymous tip that came in back in 2005. Someone picked up the phone 21 years after the murder and called it in. That person knew something, but it was not enough then. Today, combined with the newly released suspect description and modern forensic capabilities, that same kind of tip, or a new one, could make all the difference. If you have information, investigators want to hear from you. You can contact Detective Sergeant Barrigan and Detective Harrington of the San Jose Police Department Homicide Unit by calling 408-277-5283. You can also submit an anonymous tip through the P3 Tips mobile app by calling the Silicon Valley Crime Stoppers tip line at 408-947-STOP or through the website at siliconvalleycrimestoppers.org. If your information leads to an arrest, you may be eligible for a cash reward. Kelly Ralston's family has been waiting for over 40 years. The investigators have not given up, and now they are asking the public to stand with them. Let us talk about why this case matters beyond the details of what happened on that August afternoon in 1984. Kelly Ralston was 21 years old. She was born on May 12, 1963, and she lived exactly 21 years, 3 months, and 16 days before someone ended her life. She never got to finish her degree. She never got to put on a badge and serve the community she was preparing to protect. She never got to grow old, have a family, build the life she was working toward. And the person who took all of that from her has been walking free for over 4 decades. There is something fundamentally wrong with that. The justice system is built on the idea that accountability follows crime, that violence does not simply disappear into the past without consequence. But in cold cases like this, that principle is tested in the most painful way possible. When a case goes unsolved for 40 years, it sends a message, not necessarily an intentional one, but a real one, that some victims can be forgotten. That time is the enemy of justice. That a killer can outlast an investigation simply by waiting. The San Jose Police Department's decision to reopen this case, to publicize the suspect description that sat hidden for decades, to partner with the district attorney's cold case unit and leverage modern forensic technology, all of that is a statement of refusal. A refusal to let Kelly Ralston be forgotten. A refusal to accept that the passage of time erases moral accountability. Cases like this one remind all of us who follow true crime not just as entertainment, but as a form of civic engagement, that our attention matters. Sharing this story, talking about Kelly Ralston by name, keeping her case in the public consciousness, that is how cold cases get broken. Someone out there right now may be watching this video and thinking about a name, a face, a story they heard, a neighbor they remembered. That moment of recognition, that clicking into place of memory and information, could be the moment that changes everything for Kelly's family. Let us bring it all together one more time, because this is the kind of story that deserves to be told clearly, completely, and with every detail in plain sight. Kelly Ann Ralston was born on May 12, 1963. She was 21 years old, a student at San Jose State University, a brown belt in karate, and a young woman with a dream of becoming a police officer. On August 28, 1984, at approximately 12:45 in the afternoon, her roommate came home to their shared apartment at 4965 Edgar Court in San Jose, California, and found Kelly suffering from multiple traumatic injuries. She had been stabbed. She had fought back with everything she had. The apartment bore the marks of a violent, desperate struggle. A small kitchen knife was recovered at the scene, believed to be the murder weapon. Kelly Ralston died of numerous wounds throughout her body. She was 21 years old. The San Jose Police Department investigated. They worked leads. They interviewed witnesses. One of those witnesses gave them a description of a possible suspect, a white male adult, approximately 5 feet 7 to 5 feet 8 inches tall, 32 to 35 years old at the time, thin build, strawberry blonde hair, and that description was never released to the public. For 40 years, it sat in a file. In 2005, an anonymous tip came in suggesting the suspect likely lived in the area at the time of the crime. The case stayed cold. Then in February 2026, SJPD and the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Cold Case Unit reopened the investigation, released the previously hidden suspect description, and made a public appeal for new information. The case number is 84-241-0511. The investigators are Detective Sergeant Barragan and Detective Harrington of the San Jose Police Department Homicide Unit. The phone number is 408-277-5283. Anonymous tips can be submitted through P3 Tips or Silicon Valley Crime Stoppers at 408-947-STOP. Kelly Ralston deserves justice. Her family deserves answers. And somewhere out there, someone holds the piece that finishes this puzzle. This case is not over. Not by a long shot. That is the case of Kelly Ralston, a 21-year-old college student, a karate brown belt, a young woman who wanted to protect people, murdered in her own home on an August afternoon in 1984, and still waiting for justice more than 40 years later. If this video moved you, if this story stayed with you, then do something with that feeling. Hit that like button right now. Share this video with everyone you know. Post it on your social media. The more eyes on this case, the better the chance that the right person sees it and makes that call. Subscribe to Crime Reporting CR if you are not already part of this community. We cover real cases, real victims, real investigations, and we do not stop until the story has been told completely. Drop a comment below telling us what you think about this case. Do you think investigators will finally crack it with modern forensic technology? Do you think someone in the San Jose community is still carrying this secret? Let us talk about it. Every single share of this video is a chance to reach someone who knows something. Every view is a reminder that Kelly Ralston was a real person, not just a case number. She was 21 years old. She had a name. She had a dream. And she deserves justice. We will see you in the next case.